Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and you hear that music? When you hear that on a Friday, it means we're going to do Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, and we are consistent. There's the music, and here comes the Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. People send weird questions to Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin is well known for answering weird questions. He's got a podcast called, and a YouTube channel, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which you can find at mysterious.fm. And we've been doing this for a few years now, and so that means we get lots of weird questions, and Jimmy curates them, and then we go through them. I will probably give out the phone number, but don't believe me when I do it. It'll be a mistake when I do it, because all the questions are already in today. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Our guest, well, look at that. It's Jimmy Akin. Hello, Jimmy. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Cy Kellett. How you doing?
I'm really good. I'm looking forward to the weird questions. I'm always impressed with the things that people come up with to ask about. So, looking forward to some of that. But you've seen them all, so you know what's coming. And is it going to be weird enough? Did you get enough weirdness for this time?
They're not as weird as they sometimes are, but there's a good amount of weirdness in there.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. And what drops? I almost did it, but what dropped today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Part one of Do Unicorns Exist? So today we went through all the historic reports of unicorns from different cultures, and then next week we're going to use faith and reason to tell you what's behind them all. And there are some real unicorns, and they are not all the things you might expect.
Wasn't there a song about the unicorns didn't get on the ark or something, and that's why we don't?
By the Irish Rovers, yes.
Oh, the Irish Rovers. Does that make up any part of the show? Will we be hearing you talk?
It does next week.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, check it out at mysterious.fm or at YouTube. You better tell me. I'm not going to get it right.
YouTube.com/Jimmy Akin.
That's so hard to remember.
Yeah.
YouTube.com/Jimmy Akin. All right. Time for questions. Numero uno comes from Mike. I mean no disrespect with this question.
Mm-hmm. Start.
All right, there we go, Mike. Thank you. I noticed a few weeks ago that Jimmy was leaving the G off of words like teachin or reasonin and others. Mm-hmm. I can only assume that this is the normal dialect in Arkansas.
Yep.
Question: is this change due to a conscious effort to return to his, quote, roots? Or is this an outcome of being immersed back in the Arkansas dialect through local conversations? Love Mysterious World and Cy's awkward dad joke sense of humor. I think you might be mischaracterizing that, Mike, but thank you very much.
So I've been getting a lot of comments about this, and overwhelmingly the comments have been positive. But basically, I moved out to California, 31 years ago, and I deliberately suppressed Southern elements in my speech. I didn't suppress all of them. I would still say things like sola scriptura instead of sola scriptura.
Oh.
But I did broadly suppress them. And so when I moved back to Arkansas, I decided I'm embracing the way folks speak in Arkansas. I'm back home, and so I'm going to talk this way. I could have let it emerge over the course of time, but I decided that would just stretch it out. It would make the transition harder for people, and it would be inconsistent, and it would go back and forth. And so I decided to just consciously flip the switch and go back to, a typical Arkansas mode of speech. And part of that, which I was surprised, this is the thing I get most in the comments, is people notice the so-called G drops.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where you have a word that is in written form ends in ing, and you don't pronounce the G. But the thing is, there's two things. The first is there's no actual G there. That's just a writing convention in English, but there's no G sound. We don't say teaching or reasoning. What that actually is a nasalization of the N sound. And so instead of saying teachin, you say teaching. And so you're pushing some of the air through your nose. But I have been dropping those, so-called dropping them, but really it's just not nasalizing the N. But I was doing that anyway on a bunch of stuff. I'm doing it more consistently now, but I was surprised that that's what leaps out to folks, because there are a bunch of other aspects of what I'm doing too, that are markers for like a Northwest Arkansas Ozark accent. Another one is deasperization of final plosives, which is plosives are letters like P and D and T and K. And when they appear on the ends of words, you don't aspirate them the same way. So so instead of saying stop, you would just say stop. And you can hear the difference between stop with the plosive sound and stop. Another one is dropping final plosives when they're part of a consonant cluster. So like D is a plosive, and so but N is a consonant. And so in the word and, you've got a consonant cluster there at the end, and you tend to drop the plosive. So and becomes an. Jill and John came over. Then there's the pen-pen merger, which is so natural to me, it's even hard for me to pronounce it. But basically, there's a vowel shift when you have the letter E before a liquid consonant, which is like N or M, and so you pronounce, if I can do it right, in standard English or in non-Northwest Arkansas English, P-E-N, pen, gets pronounced the same as P-I-N, pin. And so I'm doing that. And then there's also a vowel shift that's kind of interesting, which is the vowel for I in like Northeastern English, it gets pronounced I. In broadly Southern English, it gets pronounced ah. And in Northwest Arkansas, it's kind of a fusion of the two, where you start with the broader ah, but then it transitions into the I sound. So like my wife. So there's a bunch going on there, but I decided I'm gonna make the switch, and I'm gonna flip the switch, and it'll become natural. It's already becoming natural for me. My internal monologue has shifted, but people get used to it, and it'll just be, this is the way Jimmy Akin talks.
Very well. Thank you very much, Mike, for the question. I got to tell you, Darren almost hit the dump button when you said deaspiration of final plosives. He was just about to hit the dump button, but then he realized, he's not swearing. That's just regular talk. All right, let's do another one before we take a break. Let's go to Andrew from Tennessee. In the very first weird questions I listened to, Jimmy answered a question asking if a man was teleported back in time to 5 BC, what obligations he would have to do in order to worship God properly. Now, let me ask the reverse of that. Suppose a man from 500 BC was in stasis for thousands of years and wakes up when a group of archaeologists discover him. I imagine the option to be baptized and confirmed would be just as open to him as to any other man, provided he knows what the sacraments and the gospel mean. But if the man were to die after his waking up in the 21st century without having done these things, what would be the state of his soul?
Well, it'd be the same as anybody else who dies without doing those things. If he was innocently ignorant of his need to do them, then God wouldn't hold that against him. And if he otherwise lived up to the light and the grace that he had in his life, then he would make it to heaven. On the other hand, if he didn't otherwise live up to the light and the grace he had, then he wouldn't go to heaven. So the same rules would apply to him as apply to anybody else.
Andrew, thanks very much for that one. All right. I think now we'll take a break. We'll take a very quick break. We'll be back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
He is honored by the Church as one of the most learned bishops in Church history.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Isidore of Seville came from a holy family. His 3 siblings are also saints. He succeeded his brother as Bishop of Seville in 600 and used diocesan councils to build a Christian culture in Spain. He is said to have known the sum total of all learning of his age. He died in 636 and was named a doctor in 1722.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. That music is the weird music because it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin today on Catholic Answers Live. We've been doing this for years now. It's always a lot of fun, and we've got lots of weird questions to come. I don't even know most of them. I've only read ahead a couple during the break. So, but there's usually a good amount of weirdness in there. So hang on. Jennifer asked this. We have a ghost where I work. And I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen and heard it with my own eyes.
And presumably ears. Most people don't hear with their eyes.
That's a good point. A coworker recently got a spirit box, and it has picked up some interesting things, but I wasn't there when they were using it. Do those things, spirit boxes, have any legitimacy to them?
Okay, so I'm interested to hear about this. Now, as a paranormal investigator, I haven't done an investigation of this case, and part of what happens in an investigation is you always look for natural explanations first to see if there could, this could, for example, be something that's being misperceived as a ghost when really it's not. But I'll take you at your word. So you've got a ghost in your office. Someone's brought in a spirit box. Now, not everybody knows what a spirit box is, so I'll explain. Spirit boxes are what are known as a form of instrumental transcommunication, or ITC, where you use an instrument of some kind to try to facilitate communication with the departed. And spirit boxes in particular are basically radios that are, there are variations, but the basic form is it's like a radio that rapidly changes frequencies. So it's getting a little bit from one station, a little bit from another, and it kind of goes back and forth, up and down the dial. Town to town, up and down the dial, in fact. And the idea is that a spirit may be able to use it to communicate with the living by grabbing little bits of what's being said on different stations and stringing them together. Now, and so what will happen is people will turn on a spirit box and they may say, "Hello, who are you?" or something like that. And then they listen to see what's coming through the spirit box based on these little snippets of conversations on radio. Now, I will say that this is not impossible in principle. If spirits are precognizing what's about to be said on a radio station, and then they somehow psychokinetically pause it so that it can catch that little bit of dialogue, and then they're also precognizing what's going to happen on another station, and they psychokinetically make it go there so you could string together words or syllables or something. Well, yeah, that'd be possible in principle, but that's pretty robust functioning to be able to tell what people on different stations are about to say and then make it go there. And because of how robust that is, I'm not big on spirit boxes, and neither are most paranormal investigators. This is something you see ghost hunters doing a lot, but not so much paranormal investigators. And it's in part because of the conceptual problem of how would this even work for a spirit. And it's also because humans have a known tendency that's called apophenia. Apophenia is the tendency to see meaningful patterns in random data. And this is something that's built into us on the biological level because, growing up as a species, if you assume that the random rustling of the grass behind you because the wind is blowing on it is just random rustling, there might be a tiger behind the grass. It's about to leap out and eat you. So you would die. You wouldn't be able to pass on your genes. And so that would be the end of your gene line. On the other hand, if the grass is rustling behind you and you think there may be a tiger there, even if there's not, you live and survive and you get to pass on your genes. And so there's an evolutionary selection pressure towards seeing meaning in meaningless stuff, because it's safer for you that way. And so humans have a biological tendency towards apophenia. And apophenia is responsible for a lot of kind of sketchy phenomena, like, oh, you made a cheese sandwich and the Virgin Mary's face is in it now, and it's just random scorch marks. Or you're listening to jumbled noise from radio stations and you think, oh, there's a message for me here. So even though spirit boxes are not impossible, I'm pretty skeptical of them.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for the question. I believe in the answer, Jennifer, you got a WKRP in Cincinnati reference. Did I pick that up?
Yeah.
I thought
town to town, up and down the dial.
Yeah. And by the way, watch the Thanksgiving turkey episode. If you haven't seen it, watch.
With God as my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
All right. Joseph wants to know this. Just wondering if you can address something that kept coming to my mind while listening to Mysterious World. This must be the number of it. AA1.
It's actually not the number. It's the title of the book, AA 1025. It stands for Anti-Apostle 1025.
Yeah, okay. If so, thanks. My question is not directly related, but it made me think about Bella Dodd and her impact related to infiltration of the church along with her conversation. I just want to hear your thoughts on this. On a side note, I really enjoy your work, but I particularly enjoy Mysterious World.
Well, thank you, Joseph. And I got a bunch of questions about Bella Dodd after that episode aired. AA 1025 is a book that was written by a French author named Marie Carré, and it presents itself as the diary of a guy who was from Poland who became a communist infiltrator in the Catholic Church and caused tremendous damage. And it's basically kind of an inside conspiracy plot book. And some people think it's all real. And so I went through AA 1025. I told the story and we looked at whether it's real or not. And you can listen to the episode for yourself to hear what conclusions we came to, including what Marie Carré herself said about the book, which a lot of people don't know. But there was this 20th century figure here in America named Bella Dodd. She was an ex-communist who had a conversion to the Catholic faith. And people have claimed that she said things like, oh, yeah, I put 1,000 young communists into the seminaries to corrupt the Catholic Church and stuff like that. And I've done some research on her that really makes those claims problematic. And it's not just me. There are other people who've looked into this too, like, for example, Kevin Simons. And he's actually got an article on Bella Dodd. So if you Google Bella Dodd and Kevin Simons, it'll come up and you can read it. But basically, the claims that are attributed to her cannot be documented. They're not in. It's like it was said she gave a speech at this place and she said this stuff, and it turns out we've got a record of the speech and she didn't say that stuff. So it looks like a lot of these claims are either falsely attributed to her or based on misremembering or things like that. And because of how common these questions are, I may well do an episode on Bella Dodd in the future too.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the question, Joseph. We got time for more. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Today, Lisa Ann asks this: is there any conditions that must be met for the devil to possess someone? In other words, are there any characteristics of a person that would need to be present in order for that person to be possessed by a demon?
Okay, so this deals with what I call theory of possession. This is one of sort of two major theories. The other is theory of exorcism. Theory of possession deals with how do you get possessed, and theory of exorcism deals with how does the exorcism get the demon out of you? How does it work? And the thing is, the church does not have teaching in this area. It recognizes demon possession as a thing, and it has diagnostic criteria to diagnose demon possession, and it has prescribed rituals, namely the exorcism itself, to get rid of the demon. But it doesn't have a lot of support in theory about either how you get possessed or how you get delivered. And as a result of that, exorcists disagree with each other widely on this. You know, people will often say, well, oh, exorcists say this, and they'll name some theory. But really, if you actually read the writings and listen to interviews with different exorcists, they are all over the map. There is not an established common theory. What there are bubbles of exorcists who talk to each other and within that bubble, you're going to have a common theory. But there are different bubbles and there are different theories of exorcism. One of the ones that I've heard advocated on by some American exorcists on YouTube is what you could call the legal right theory of possession. And the idea is that demons will not enter you unless they have acquired a legal right to be there. And essentially, the corresponding theory of exorcism is what happens is you hang up the eviction notice and it'll make the demons leave. The problem is that I don't think this theory is well supported by the evidence, because if demons were such rule abiders that they wouldn't enter you without the legal right to do so, they wouldn't be demons because they would be keeping God's law. And secondly, if they were such rule abiders that if they don't have the legal right to be here, they will vamoose, well, then all you got to do is hang up the eviction notice and they go. And that's not what happens in exorcisms. It can be hard to get the demons out. They will try to stay. And so both of those points seem to me to contradict the legal rights theory of possession. Another theory that exists in another bubble is the spell theory. And this is the theory that was favored by the well-known Italian exorcist, Gabriel Amorth. He thought most of the time the person and I agree with this part, most of the time the person has done nothing wrong. Don't blame the victim. Don't make it sound like the person who got possessed was automatically at fault. In Amorth's view, and I agree with him on this part, it is rare that the person who gets possessed was doing something wrong. Instead, and this is where I disagree with Amorth, Amorth thought that the majority of the time when someone gets possessed, it's because some wizard put an evil spell on him. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that evil spells are as common as Amorth thought, and I don't think that they're automatically going to have effects on people. So that's another theory that you'll find in another bubble of exorcists about how people get possessed. So those are two theories that are out there that I think are poorly supported. So I'll tell you my own theory. My theory is the opportunistic attack theory. And the basic idea is demons are kind of like bears. You know, if you go out in the woods, you know, there aren't bears everywhere. There's not a bear under every rock. But if you go out and you hang out in areas where there are bears and you bring food, it may cause the bear to opportunistically attack you. So if you are in areas where demons are around, you know, let's say you're invoking spirits and calling on unknown spirits to have interactions with you, then one of those spirits might be a demon and it might attack you. But as long as you're not doing that, as long as you're not invoking spirits, you don't really got to worry about this because we have God on our side. We have his protection. And you know, so just say your prayers, say your St. Michael prayer, trust yourself to God, and don't be paranoid and don't worry about it. Not watching every movie or reading any book or playing any game. As long as you're not invoking spirits, you're not invoking spirits. When you start invoking spirits is when you really have to start being concerned about the possibilities here. And so just trust God and, you know, don't worry about it beyond that. Now, you might get attacked anyway, because, like, you look at the little boy who has the really tough demon in the Gospels where the disciples can't cast it out. And Jesus says, this kind requires prayer and fasting. Well, this is a little boy. He had this demon from the time he was super small. He didn't do anything wrong in the text, and there's very little chance of him having done something wrong. So that looks like a random drive-by demon attack. But so we don't need to blame the victim. Sometimes the victim might be to blame, like if they're invoking spirits. But in general, just stay out of high-risk areas and doing high-risk things.
All right. Thank you, Lisa Ann, for the question. That brings us to the break at the bottom of the hour, and we got to take that break. But when we come back, we've got lots and lots more weird questions for Jimmy Akin. Hang on. We'll be right back to do that after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Are you scared to talk about abortion? Don't worry, almost everyone is. You can overcome this fear as Trent Horn shows in the newly revised and expanded second edition of Persuasive Pro-Life. With a little knowledge and a few proven techniques, you can become a bold and effective apologist for life. Visit shop.catholic.com to order your copy of Persuasive Pro-Life and never again be afraid to speak up. Also available at good Catholic bookstores.
Monday on More to Life, no parent is an island.
Got parenting questions? We'll give you the tools you need to succeed.
That's on the next More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. At Music Means It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, and lots more weird questions to come. Hey, I have this note here from Carrie. Only 3 days left to visit the 20 Answers category at shop.catholic.com and take advantage of our buy one, get one 20 Answers sale. For every 20 Answers book you buy, you get another one for free for the next 3 days at shop.catholic.com. Check it out, shop.catholic.com. All right, here's a weird question for Jimmy. This one comes from Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jesus ever get bitten by mosquitos, ticks, lice, or other blood-feeding pests? And if so, what would the implications be of these creatures potentially being the first among creation to receive the precious blood of Christ? I tend to think about this when hiking in deep, quiet woods and swarmed by a fog of billions of mosquitoes with nothing apparently to eat but me. Perhaps they cannot starve to death and are, in a sense, immortal. Huh?
So he's asking, like, would drinking the blood of Christ make the mosquitoes and ticks immortal?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they do have both mosquitoes and ticks in Israel. I checked. I wasn't sure because I've been to Israel, but I haven't had mosquito or tick problems there. the places I knew in the old world that have mosquitoes are like in parts of Italy around Rome, and also in sub-Saharan Africa, which is why sickle cell anemia is common in both of those areas. Because it turns out if you have the gene for sickle cell anemia, it provides partial protection against malaria, which is, of course, spread by mosquitoes. And so if you there's a survival benefit to having the gene for sickle cell anemia if you live in an area where mosquitoes are common, which is why that gene, that mutation, arose both in the parts of Italy where they have mosquitoes and in sub-Saharan Africa where they have mosquitoes. Problem is, if you get 2 copies of that gene, then you get sickle cell anemia, and that's bad, but it's offset in the population as a whole by the benefit of having partial immunity to malaria. In any event, I checked, and they do have mosquitoes and ticks in Israel, and apparently the mosquitoes can be quite bad in some places. Jesus would have been as vulnerable to creatures of this sort as anybody else, unless he had special divine protection from them. And we have no evidence of him having such protection. He chose to make himself vulnerable to things in this life. And so unless God did something special to protect him, and he didn't protect him from the cross, so he could have suffering up to the level of being crucified and dying, well, he could have lesser levels of suffering too, like getting bit by a tick or a mosquito and having an itch for a while. So assuming he got bit, what would happen to the mosquitoes? Or let's just keep it with mosquitoes to make it simple. Would they have become immortal? Well, it's an interesting idea, but even when we receive Holy Communion, we don't become immortal. We will receive spiritual benefit if we receive Holy Communion in faith. But I don't think mosquitoes are receiving Holy Communion in faith if they bite Jesus. I think they're just looking for a meal. They're treating Jesus's blood like anybody else's blood. And so that would suggest a different parallel in the New Testament. If you read 1 Corinthians, where St. Paul is talking about how some of the Corinthians are failing to discern the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. They're treating it like ordinary bread and ordinary wine. That's what they're doing, and that sounds to me like what the mosquitoes are doing. And so St. Paul says, you're treating something holy as if it's profane, and that's why many of you are weak and sick, and some of you sleep, meaning some of you have even died. So by not receiving Jesus's blood in faith, you could even argue the mosquitoes would die quicker, because they're profaning the holy. Now, that also might not happen, but you can. I would argue they're not likely to get any benefit from it in any special way.
All right. Well, I got to say, Jimmy, this is one of the things I love about Weird Questions is I just never would have thought of that question. It's just I love what people come up with. All right, this next one comes from Ridge. So I read a book about a guy that whenever he dies, he is reborn, but with all the memories of his previous lives. Mm-hmm. My question is that if he became a priest in one of his lives, would that end at his death, or would he technically still be a priest in every life after that?
Okay, so this question has a radical counterfactual in it, because we know that in our universe, humans do not reincarnate. That's what it indicates in Hebrews, where it says it is appointed for man once to die and then comes judgment. So we don't reincarnate. At least that's the rule. And so we're deviating from that in another universe where God would have had to set up things differently. Okay, so we can go with that. So in this universe we're talking about, this imaginary universe, this guy is dying and reincarnating, and he gets ordained as a priest in one life. What happens when he dies and gets reborn? Well, it is commonly understood, at least in our universe, that ordination marks the soul. It's one of 3 sacraments that does that. Baptism does that. confirmation does that, and ordination does that. And so assuming that there's a mark on our soul, that mark goes with us when our soul leaves our body. And so I would propose that in such a universe, he would still be a priest, because he's going to carry the mark of ordination on his soul into his next life. But just want to point out, this is a fictional universe. This is not the real world.
Okay, very good. All right. We got time to do another one. Ridge, thank you very much for the question. This one comes from Andrew. Who invented smoking? More importantly, how did people discover that inhaling burning fumes from various herbs feels good?
Well, in terms of the first question, we have evidence of smoking among Native Americans, and they're kind of the culture that made it famous. You know, here in America, they would grow tobacco and smoke that. There actually are parallels in other cultures in the old world that also had smoking, but it didn't catch on the same way as it did here. I'm talking, before European contact. There were people in the ancient world, in the old world, who also did things like smoking. And we have a pretty good idea of how it would have arisen, because tobacco, like other things that people would smoke, are basically forms of incense. And incense looks like a human universal. It looks like, if you have, let me explain the incense part again first. So if you have a cigarette, it's basically a stick of incense. If you have a cigar, it's basically a stick of incense. If you have a pipe, it's basically a thurifer or incense holder. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens in these cases, people will not only smell the incense, they'll also taste it. Well, presumably that's how it would have got started. It would have got started with incense. People would be burning incense. They might have a pile of, like back during the Paleolithic, let's say they're living in a cave. They put a pile of sweet smelling plants, on the floor in the cave, and they light it on fire, and they enjoy the smell of it. And then that could lead people to say, I wonder what would happen if I had a more direct experience of this incense rather than just smelling it in this confined space. What if I rolled some of it up and tried it, or put it in an incense holder and, had a way to suck on it so I could taste it as well as smelling it? And that's how it would have begun. And it probably was invented multiple times in multiple locations. In fact, as I said, we have evidence for it being invented in different places around the world in the ancient world. And it became especially popular here in the Americas. And then after European contact, it went global.
Well, that brings us right to where we should probably take a break, Andrew. So thanks for the question. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. More to come right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Hey, this is Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. I'll be delving into the fascinating world of miracles and taking you on a hunt that explores the greatest mysteries and marvels of the Catholic Church. I'll be examining what constitutes a miracle, how miracles are investigated and approved, and the role they play in the lives of the faithful. We'll look at the miracles of the Gospels and early Christianity, considering the claims of the miraculous in our own modern age.
The Miracle Hunter, tomorrow at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Having some fun on a Friday with Jimmy Akin here with us. It's Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin this hour. And we got a bunch of them. And this one I'm kind of interested in. I don't know why.
So you've just been phoning in the rest of them.
The rest of them of no interest. No, that's not how I meant it. I have an extra level of interest in this one.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm almost an expert on these creatures, having watched a certain 1960s TV show Do you know what that is, Darren? Oh, you do? All right. Daniel wants to know this.
For anyone playing along at home, it's the I Dream of Jeannie theme.
And this is what Daniel said. Can the belief in djinn be incorporated into the Catholic worldview? And if so, how would this affect the categories of alien and demon by adding a third possible explanation of unexplained phenomena?
Okay, so jinn, or genies, as they're sometimes called, are a type of creature that is talked about in Islam, but I don't know that they originate in Islam, because Islam really drew on the folk beliefs and religious beliefs of previous people in Arabia before the time of Muhammad. I haven't researched jinn in detail yet. I've gathered some materials to do this, but I haven't looked in detail yet. So it may well be the case that there was a belief in jinn before Muhammad. I just haven't looked it up yet. The belief about them is that they are not humans, and they are not immortal, and they're not angels, but they're something else, and they're made out of fire. At least that's how they're conceptualized. And so they're a kind of fire-based creature that is distinct from both humans and angels. Could something like that exist? Well, it doesn't contradict anything in the Christian faith. The Christian faith doesn't say fire-based intelligent creatures don't exist. They wouldn't be like us. They wouldn't have our role in nature. We are God's imagers, so we represent God to the world and are meant to rule over the world, but that doesn't mean there aren't other creatures. And so is there any positive reason to think from a Christian faith perspective that jinn might exist? Well, surprisingly, there might be. If you read Psalm 104, verse 4, and it'll be a little different in different translations, but one of the things it says in common translations, it'll say God makes his messengers, or angels, winds, his attendants, or servants, a flame of fire. So the idea would be angels can manifest as winds, and God's attendants or servants, it links to being flames of fire. So that sounds kind of like a jinn. Now, there are other translations, like the New American Bible says it kind of backwards. You make the winds your angels, or make the winds your messengers, and flame and fire you make your ministers, which makes it sound a little different. But I checked the word order in the Hebrew, and the former translation, you make your angels the winds and your servants flames of fire, that's actually the word order in the Hebrew. But you can debate what it means. Also, this passage gets quoted in Hebrews in the New Testament. Hebrews 1:7 says, and concerning the angels, he says, the one who makes his angels winds and his servants a flame of fire. So that could make it sound like God has servants that are like the wind, or servants that are like flames of fire. Now, you could say this is poetic language. It's not meant to be taken literally, but it is at least suggestive, and it's something that someone could appeal to as a reason for proposing some kind of God having some kind of fire-based creatures. Now, how would we classify them in Christian terms? Well, okay, the way language has evolved in Christianity, anything that is not a human and is a created being, we just call it an angel. That's not really what it is, as the Catechism points out, and quoting St. Augustine, angel is really a job description. It means messenger. And God has lots of spirits working for him that are not technically messengers. Like he has throne guardians. That's what the cherubim do in Ezekiel, for example, and what the seraphim do in Isaiah. So he's got, other kinds of spirits working for him too, besides just the lowly messengers. But the way the language has evolved today, we just call them all angels. And so if God did have some kind of fire-related creature that, spirit that works for him, well, we just call them an angel anyway. So they would probably still be counted as angels today. They would just be a special class of angel that has a special connection with fire.
All right. Thanks. That was Daniel. Daniel, thank you very much for the question. On we go. Dave wants to know this. What is Baphomet?
Okay, so Baphomet was a deity that in the Middle Ages, the Knights of Templar were accused of worshiping. The Knights of Templar, and by the way, I've got a whole episode of Mysterious World about the Knights of Templar, and we talk about Baphomet in it. But basically, they were after the First Crusade, so this is around the year 1000. The Crusaders came in, they evicted the Muslim forces from the Holy Land, and they set up the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which was a European-style kingdom based in Jerusalem. But there was a lot of harassment of Christians going on pilgrimages, and so the Knights Templar, after the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where they were based, had a mission. They were a military monastic order whose mission was to protect the holy sites and to protect Christians on their way to and from the holy sites. And they also had kind of one of the first big banking network in the medieval world, to where you could deposit money in one area and then go with the Knights of Templar and then go to another area and pull the money out of their banking system, which meant you didn't have to bring your money with you, so you couldn't be robbed of it while you were going on your pilgrimage or in transit. And so as a result of these financial services that the Knights Templar started performing for people, they got rich. Also because people love supporting charitable causes, like let's help those pilgrims get to where they're going to and coming from, and we're helping this order that's based in Jerusalem. People gave a lot of donations to the Knights Templar, and that also helped them become rich as an order. Well, then the King of France, Philip the Unfair, or Philip the Fair, he's normally called because he had blonde hair. But Philip the Unfair decided he wanted in on that rich Templar money action. And so he accused them of doing all kinds of bad stuff and got an inquisition started about him. And among the bad stuff he accused him of doing was worshiping a kind of head idol that was a deity called Baphomet. And you see pictures of Baphomet. It looks like a goat. In most illustrations, you'll see this kind of satanic looking goat thing, and that's Baphomet. So what's the truth about Baphomet? Well, there is no historical evidence that the Knights worshipped him. Some of them, under torture, would say they worshipped him to get the torture to stop. And then once the torture stopped, they recanted and said, nah, that's not true. We didn't do any of that. I just said that to make you stop ripping my fingernails out. And so we don't have any evidence that Baphomet was ever worshipped by the Templars or frankly by anybody else in the medieval world. It is thought that the name Baphomet may be a corruption of Mohammed, or Muhammad, as we would say today. And so that's one possible speculation for the origin of Baphomet, because the Knights Templar were dealing with followers of Mohammed as a bad guy, and that might have gotten corrupted into Baphomet as this evil bad guy deity. The idea, and this is kind of a folk idea, that Muslims worshiped Muhammad. They don't really, but that was an idea that some Christians would have. And so it's possible that Baphomet may be a corruption of the idea of Muhammad. That's speculative, though, but that's basically what we know about Baphomet in short form.
Thanks, Dave. On we go. Christopher wants to know this. My son Jonathan would like a deep dive on angelic swords. Genesis chapter 3, verse 24. Did the angels forge them? Are they still around? Did God invent swords?
Well, I wish I could give you a deep dive on this subject, and I wish I could tell you all kinds of cool things about angelic swords. What I can tell you may not be as exciting as all that. First of all, in Genesis 3, it doesn't actually say that the cherubim that God posted at the Garden of Eden used the sword. It said he posted cherubim and a burning sword that turned every which way to guard the way to the tree of life. And so that makes it sound like the sword was moving on its own. The cherubim were there. They were guardians, like they're guardians around God's throne in Ezekiel. So they're here too. But it sounds like there's a sword that's being wielded by an invisible person or something, and it's turning every which way. It's kind of like an AI robotic sword that's will skewer anybody and burn anybody who tries to come get the tree of life. Now, the church acknowledges that early Genesis here uses a lot of symbolism. And so really what this is a symbol of man's lack of access to immortality. That's really what this is a symbol of. But that doesn't mean we can't have fun with it on the level of the image itself, of the metaphorical language. Now, it's possible that the cherubim could use the sword, or at least they were working with the sword. And here I would mention that, people understood angelic guards like the cherubim in terms of human guards. So you'd see them using as if, you'd see them with armor and shields and swords and chariots and stuff like that, the kind of things that ancient soldiers used. If God were giving us the Bible today, we might see angels with machine guns and rifles and tanks and, Kevlar and stuff like that. But basically, they were drawing all this imagery from the kinds of warfare they saw around them in the human world. But really, angels are non-physical beings that don't use physical weaponry. So ultimately, the sword is just a symbol of God's prevention of mankind from entering paradise to get at the tree of life. But it's still some cool imagery.
It is cool imagery, especially that, what would you say, AI? I can't remember, but that, I was
robotic AI-controlled sword.
Yeah, we need to get one of those. Thank you to both you and your son, Jonathan, Christopher. This next one comes from Ryan. Would it be a stretch or not, from a Catholic perspective, to say that both multiple personality disorder and rabies are different ways in which demonic activity can manifest? That is, the personalities of those with MPD actually being demons in disguise, waiting for the right moment to strike, or rabies being a disease that could evolve into a form of demonic possession that can manifest in various animals.
Okay, I'm going to have to be quick, but demons can cause diseases, and that would presumably include rabies, which is transmitted via I guess it's a virus, and we've identified the virus. So normally the virus is just functioning as a natural virus, but a demon could influence the transmission of the virus. But rabies itself is not demonic possession. A demon could cause rabies and might affect the course of rabies and even manifest through rabies, but you're going to need additional evidence to propose a demon. You can't just look at a rabid dog and say that's got a demon. With multiple personality disorder, which these days is called dissociative identity disorder, it does have some similarities to possession. You do have an alternate personality manifesting, but it's not the same thing. And so a demon might cause dissociative identity disorder and might manifest through dissociative identity disorder. But once again, you're going to need additional evidence that there's actually a demon involved so that it's more than just an ordinary case of dissociative identity disorder. Also, just to have a note on this, and I'm planning to have a future Mysterious World episode on this, there's a huge debate about whether dissociative identity disorder even exists. Some of the famous cases, like the Sybil case, that really took off in the 1970s, they look like they're fake. And so there's actually a big debate, and personally I'm a skeptic about dissociative identity disorder being a real thing.
But rabies exists, Ryan. We know that.
Rabies does.
Come back, Yeller. Poor old Yeller.
Come back, Shane.
Oh yeah, come back, Shane. I guess that's the song, Come Back Yeller. I'll now sing the old... No, I'm not going to sing the old Yeller song. Ryan, thank you very much for the question. It was pretty weird. And there's more weird questions to come. We got an entire hour's worth of weird questions to come for Jimmy Akin. hang on. They're all already in. We just haven't heard the answers. Be back right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Having fun working through weird questions with Jimmy Akin. That's what that music means, by the way, where it's a weird question show when you hear that music. You can't call today. Well, Edgar's out. Edgar just took the afternoon off because he knew we were doing weird questions. So there's no one to take the call, even if you call. But we've got lots and lots of great weird questions to come. Jimmy Akin, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of a whole lot of books, including The Bible is a Catholic Book and A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. And you can find him. You can find his podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, at mysterious.fm or at, watch this, I'm going to get it, youtube.com/Jimmy Akin. Boom!
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. And it's not just Mysterious World there. I got videos coming out every single day.
Jimmy, we ended the last hour with a discussion of Old Yeller, and then it turns out Darren's...
Well, you did.
Yeah. Well, you were here for my discussion.
I was here. Yeah.
Well, yeah. You were present for my discussion. And then Darren's like, oh, yeah, that happened in my town in Missouri, the Old Yeller story. But it's actually a dog called Old Drum, who might be the inspiration for Old Yeller, or might not. We're not sure. But Darren's always got connections to weird things. I could tell you so many funny. You're not going to come on the air, are you? You're not going to talk about it. No, he's not going to talk about it. But all right.
That's just one of two connections that emerged. I mean, our first question last hour was about accents, and I mentioned the pen merger.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, "Yep, I got that too."
Yeah, in his part of the country, you say pen and pin the same way. And you tried to date, or you just were friends with a girl? You just friends with a girl named Jen, and you called her Jin the whole time, and she did. Well, that's why you couldn't date her.
Well, I had the same issue. To me, I didn't realize in other parts of the country they're not pronounced the same. It's hard for me to hear the distinction, and it's even harder for me to say the distinction. I have to really concentrate to do it.
Isn't that funny? And I am not a detail-oriented person, so I might not even hear it if you guys said it differently, but some people are very sensitive to that stuff. I do notice, however, the geographic marker for all Americans. What is a soda? Is it a Coke? Is it a pop? Is it a fizzy bubbly?
I'm so glad to be back here in Fayetteville now, and I can just, even if I'm getting Dr. Pepper, because I get like Diet Dr. They have a bunch of kinds now. I get this Diet Dr. Pepper with cherry cream flavor in it.
I like it.
And when I'm at the store getting it, I can just point to my cart and say, and I've got some Cokes in here, and they just scan them for me.
That's the funniest thing to me. Of all of the things people call it, to just call all soda Coke is funny. Like, does this happen in your neck of the woods, Jimmy? You go to a restaurant, I'd like a Coke. What flavor? I'm like, well, I like when I was a kid, I don't. What are there flavors of Coke? But they just have to know what flavor because all soda is Coke. All right, back to the not phones we go. People sent in their questions. It's weird questions with Jimmy Akin. Timothy wanted to know this. In the Transformers, there are a team of Constructicons. I didn't know I was going to have to do that.
I don't even watch Transformers, and I can figure out how to say Constructicons.
Well, you're just quicker than me. You're just quicker on the draw than I am. All right. There are a team of Constructicons where 5 robots can combine to make one giant robot. According to the official character bio, the giant robot, Devastator, which I assume is how you pronounce it, has a unique consciousness that is also a composite of all 5 unique individual robot personalities. Do you think this is a good illustration of how God works, albeit being a quintessence as opposed to a Trinity? Okay. Oh, I see. Quintessence as opposed. I was having trouble there with quintessence and then couldn't pronounce Trinity as opposed to a Trinity.
Okay. So one of the things now, people often try to come up with natural analogies for the Trinity.
Right.
And basically all natural analogies, being analogies, have common elements with the Trinity, but they all end up falling short, because the truth is there is nothing here in our world that is genuinely tripersonal and simple and so forth. Mm-hmm. So all of these natural analogies, like, the shamrock, okay, there's some threeness and there's some oneness going on there, but each leaf in a shamrock is a separate leaf, and God is not a unity of 3 separate things that way, because you could pull off each of the leaves and then you just have 3 leaves. You can't separate the members of the Trinity that way. So another is, water can take 3 forms. It can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. But and there's some threeness there and there's some oneness there, but water is not a solid and a liquid and a gas at the same time. Those are modes that water goes through. And unless you're a modalist, which is a kind of heresy actually, God does not go through modes. So all of these analogies get at something, but they all end up deviating from the reality of the Trinity. And I would say the same thing applies here. In this case, the consciousness that the 5 robots combine to create is a merged consciousness. And that's not the way God's consciousness works. It's not like there's one divine mind that is separate from the mind of the Father, the mind of the Son, and the mind of the Holy Spirit. So there is some multiplicity and unity in this analogy, but it's not an exact parallel. So we got to be a little careful with all of these natural analogies. That's why when I talk about the Trinity, I tend to use, just the category of being and person. And I point out that some beings are less than one person, like, a stone is a being, it exists, but it's less than a person. You and I, Sai, are both beings who are one person. And therefore, hypothetically, you could have a single being who's more than one person. And I kind of leave it at that, because once you start introducing analogies, they could help, but they're also going to have sharp limits on them. And even though I haven't watched the Transformers or anything like that, I have watched Commander USA's Groovy Movie back on the USA Network back in the 80s and 90s. It was hosted by a former superhero, Commander USA, Legion of Decency, retired. And his pal Lefty, which was his left hand, he drew a couple of eyes and a mouth on it with his cigar. And he would tell us stories about, in between commercial breaks, he would tell us stories about his career as a superhero. And he told us about how he once worked with the Reformers, which were a group of robots who would reform themselves into pieces of farm machinery. And he had a model of one of the robots there. He had a model of Tractor, a robot that could reform itself into a tractor. And so I loved hearing his superhero stories about working with the Reformers and other former superheroes.
Thank you very much for the question and all the challenging vocabulary, Timothy. I appreciate it. Let's do another one. Kelly wants to know this. Okay. Now, this is a compact question. Chiropractic, religion, New Age woo, scam?
Okay, so the chiropractic movement is an alternative medicine movement that got started in the 1800s, and it was founded by a guy named Palmer. That's his last name. And he proposed a bunch of ideas that are not supported by the evidence. He would claim that lots of different bodily ailments are caused by spinal misalignments and what and specifically what were known as subluxations. And this has not been borne out by modern medical studies. So there is some woo in the chiropractic movement, particularly in the Palmer school of chiropractic. There are other schools now today that don't go along with everything Palmer said. But that doesn't mean it's just a scam. And it's not a religion. I mean, a religion is a system of belief about God and or the afterlife. And they don't have definite beliefs about God and or the afterlife. They're an alternative school of alternative medicine, not a school of religion. At least that's true of chiropractic in general. There might be some somewhere that have religious ideas that they attribute to chiropractic, but that's not the mainstream of what's going on. But it's not just a scam. When I moved out to California, I had to do all the loading and unloading by myself, and it royally messed up my back for a while. And I got a GP, a regular conventional medicine GP. I would go to him and with my back problems, and he would prescribe anti-inflammatories, and they did nothing for me. And eventually I went to a chiropractor because I'd been to one before. Chiropractor, first treatment, I get relief. So there can be definite therapeutic value to chiropractic treatment. We just don't want to exaggerate the conditions it applies to, and we don't want to, use unsupported theories in terms of explaining it. But yeah, there are a lot of things chiropractors can do that is for your back and your neck and things like that really will make you feel better and that really will help you heal in a way that conventional medicine may not. So I don't diss going to a chiropractor at all. In fact, I've learned how to do some chiropractic techniques at home. So when I get messed up, which is not often these days, I can treat myself at home with chiropractic techniques, and I don't have to go to the chiropractor that often.
Kelly, thanks. That takes us to the break. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Lots more weirdness to come on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
As the largest religious media network in the world, EWTN has an important role in educating others about our Catholic faith and spreading the good news of salvation. We invite you to explore our numerous pages of historical faith documents, prayers, teachings, and other current issues in Catholicism today. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN is the global Catholic network.
There's the weird music, weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being here with us. The next weird question comes from Jason. Most Christians I know would say light as a feather, stiff as a board is demons because, if it's not demons, is there a natural explanation for why it works?
Okay, so not everyone may be familiar what light as a feather, stiff as a board is, but it's a kind of party game that is sometimes played, for example, at slumber parties with groups of children. And what'll happen is they'll have one person lay down flat, and sometimes they actually do it in a chair. But conventionally, you have the person lay down flat on the floor, and there are variations on exactly what they do, but it typically ends with several people surrounding the person who's laying down, and they're telling them you're going to be light as a feather, stiff as a board, and we're going to lift you up. And it's supposed to be impossible for them to lift this person up under normal conditions, but they're chanting light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board, and then they lift them up. And it seems remarkably easy to the people who are lifting them up. Like, this shouldn't be possible, but it is. Well, okay, I know a lot of people want to attribute things to demons, but this is not demons. This is a magic trick. This has a purely natural causation. And what that causation is divided labor, because people can make their bodies stiff. That's not the issue. People can do that, and magicians use that in fake, stage levitation tricks all the time. They'll have someone tense up their body and raise their feet and stuff like that. And as long as they're maintaining their body's tension, you can lift them up. In this case, the reason it's easy is because you're dividing the load. Typically, there's at least 4 people who are lifting the child up. So if you imagine, let's say you got an 80-pound child and you got 4 people lifting them up, that's only 20 pounds each. And so it does seem like remarkably lightweight, because I'm only lifting like 20 pounds, and this child is clearly much bigger than 20 pounds. It's because you got 3 Confederates who are lifting them up with you. And timing is crucial in this. If they don't all lift at the same time, then it's not going to work. And in fact, sometimes they will have a demonstration where, see, this shouldn't work before we put you in the state, and they try lifting at different times and it doesn't work. But then they start doing the chant, and the chant gets them into unison, so they lift at the same time. And when they lift at the same time, it works, because they're each only doing a quarter or less, if you got more than 4 people, of the person's actual weight. And kids will get really excited about this, and it'll seem really strange to them. And then they get exaggerated memories, and they think they were lifting even less than they actually were. But basically, this is a magic trick. This is not anything demonic. If you wanted to propose it's demons in some case, you would need additional evidence of the demonic besides just the fact that you had 4 people lifting somebody up and it worked, because you can accomplish the same thing with stage magic.
Jason, thank you for the question. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Brandon wants to know this. What do you think the likelihood is that we will meet beings from other realities that God created when we get to heaven? Or should we expect that this is the only reality and the sole occupants of heaven will be from this space-time continuum?
Well, there's also another possibility, which is that there are other layers of other realities, but each one has its own heaven and they don't cross over. So it seems to me that there would be 3 fundamental possibilities. The first one is there are other realities and their heavens have crossover between them, so we would get to meet people from other realities. It's also possible there are other realities, but each one has its own heaven and there's no crossover, so we don't get to meet people from other realities. And then the third possibility is there are no other realities, and so we don't get to meet people from them. In terms of which of these is the case, well, Brandon asked, what do I think the likelihood is? That asked me to put a probability on it. And I don't have a way to put a probability on it, because God hadn't told me whether he's created other realities or how they are or aren't connected to ours. I know our reality exists, but I don't have any way of estimating whether we'll meet people from other realities or whether there are other realities. So I have to be agnostic on that and just say, well, we'll have to wait and see when we get there.
As with so many things, Brandon, thanks very much for the question. This one comes from Tim. Why did Jesus ascend into the sky, and what happened to his body? Did it disappear, or did he go to other planets or outer space?
Well, so Jesus took his body with him to the heaven where God is. That is not the same thing as the sky. That is not the same thing as outer space. And you can't get to the heaven where God is by any physical route. Therefore, what happened in Acts, where we have the most vivid description of the ascension, is Jesus went up to a certain point, and then they lost sight of him because he went up above the clouds, and then he would have made a transition. to the divine heaven where God is, taking his body with him. Now, he could have done that while he was standing on earth. This gets to the why did he ascend into the sky part of the question. He could have just been standing on earth and then, wink, he transitions to the divine heaven. So he didn't have to go up to get there. So why did he go up? Well, I think the answer is fairly straightforward. His first century followers conceptualized heaven in terms of up, just like we do. We know it's not literally up. At least today we know that because, we know about outer space and they didn't back then. They conceptualized the universe as being a small, this is Ptolemaic astronomy. They conceptualize the universe as basically being a set of concentric shells, with the farthest shell being just beyond the orbit of Saturn. That was the sphere of the fixed stars. And then God was kind of understood to be physically on the other side of that outer shell. Well, we know that's not the case now, but that's how they understood things in the first century. And so I would propose that the reason he went up is to communicate in a way his first century followers would have understood that he's going to be with God. And so that's why he went up before he made the transition, even though he could have made the transition while standing on earth. It's a more vivid way of communicating that he's going to be with God, body and spirit, that was within their horizon, so to speak. It's something they would have understood more vividly than if he was just standing on earth and disappeared in front of them. That wouldn't say, I'm going to be with God as clearly as if he went up first. In fact, he did disappear in front of them on other occasions, and they didn't assume he had gone to heaven.
Tim, great question. Thank you very much for that question, for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Christopher wants to know this. Was it not a good idea for Johnny to take the bet with the devil in the song Devil Went Down to Georgia, given that the church strongly encourages not conversing with the devil or demons, even though he won the bet?
So people often misunderstand, and Christopher's actually stated it correctly, that the church encourages not talking with demons or devils, but that presupposes that's who you're talking to. Some people will say you're not supposed to talk to spirits, and that is not true. 1 John 4 says, test the spirits. And in order to test them, you got to talk to them. But then once you've realized, oh, this is a demon, then you shut down communication. Okay, so in the real world, one shouldn't have anything to do with the devil. And that includes because you can't trust him. You can't trust him to tell you the truth, and you can't trust him to honor any bet he makes. So in the real world, betting with the devil, like in The Devil Went Down to Georgia, would not be a good thing to do. But this is a fictional song, so we have to judge it by its own internal logic. If, as the song indicates, Johnny is the best that's ever been at playing the fiddle, then it wouldn't be wrong in principle to demonstrate his fiddle playing prowess. And if, as the song indicates, the devil will keep his word, then there wouldn't be anything wrong in principle with competing with the devil for a golden fiddle, which in fact Johnny gets at the end of the song. The devil concedes he's been beat. But there is a line earlier in the song that indicates Johnny is disregarding his conscience, because he says, my name's Johnny, and it might be a sin, but I'll take your bet and you're going to regret because I'm the best it's ever been. Okay, so Johnny did sin in the song by violating his doubtful conscience because he thought this might be a sin, and he just went ahead anyway without any overriding reason. It wasn't like he was pressed for time and had to make a decision. He just went ahead. I mean, you can, if you're not sure something is a sin and you're like under time pressure and you need to make a decision, well, then you make the best decision you can, and that's not sinful. But we have no indication here that Johnny was under such time pressure, and therefore it looks like he just thought, this might be a sin, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that would be a sin.
And just because you're the best that's ever been, that doesn't mean you get to do that.
At least he got a golden fiddle out of it.
He did. Fire on the mountain. Run, boys, run. All right. We can probably do another. Do you want to do it? Yeah, we can do another one before we go to the break. Shannon wants to know this.
Well, we won't be able to if you keep debating whether to do it.
That's true. All right. All right. I'll add some urgency to it. If humans evolved from different humanoid species in the past, at what point did we gain a soul?
Okay, so humans would have evolved from prior living species, and all living species have souls. Therefore, the question is not when we gained a soul, but when we gained a modern human soul. That would have happened at the time the first modern humans appeared, and the creatures that immediately preceded them would have been almost modern humans, and so they would have had almost modern human souls.
All right. That'll be good. You did that way faster than I would have expected you to do it. Now I don't know what to do.
I could have taken longer, but basically everything that's alive has a soul. The soul determines the functions of the body, and so if you have an almost human body and mind, you've got an almost human soul.
All right. Chicken in the bread pan picking out dough. My personal favorite line in that whole song. We got the Catholic Answers Conference coming up September 26th through 29th. We'd love it if you join us. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour, will be one of the speakers on the topic of Learn from Me, the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. Scott Hahn will also be there, Kimberly Hahn, Father Sebastian Walsh, Dr. Ray Garendi, Dr. William Junker, and all of the apologists in addition to the aforementioned Jimmy Akin. If you want to find out more about it, and I would hope, come join us, CatholicAnswersConference.com. CatholicAnswersConference.com. Right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin.
When it comes to Catholic teachings about Mary, there's one question we hear more than any other. Where is that in the Bible? The answer? Everywhere. In Bible Mary, the Mother of Jesus and the Word of God, Father John Weiss opens Scripture to reveal a Mary who has been hiding in plain sight. Order your copy of Bible Mary today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As we read the Gospels, every Christian faces the question again and again, what does Jesus mean? Getting the answer right is critical to both growth in holiness and fruitful evangelization. Want to know Jesus better so you can introduce him to your friends? Then it's time to get serious about understanding his words. Why not join Catholic Answers for our 10th annual Apologetics Conference? Learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. September 26th through 29th, right here in sunny San Diego. Learn from our guests, Dr. Scott Hahn and Kimberly Hahn, Dr. Ray Garendi, Father Sebastian Walsh, Billy Junker, Father Paul Check, and, of course, all of your favorite Catholic Answers apologists. It'll be 4 days of fun, faith, fellowship, and a live radio show. Seats are still available, but going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 1-888-291-8000 today.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
Monday on More to Life. No parent is an island.
Got parenting questions? We'll give you the tools you need to succeed.
That's on the next More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kelly, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's weird questions for Jimmy Akin. And try not to offend Jimmy Akin during the break by saying that, is that Charlie Daniels' only big hit? You seemed genuinely shocked that I said that. But no, Charlie Daniels has lots of big hits, but that's got to be the biggest one.
It certainly had broad crossover appeal on the rock charts, but if you listen to country music, he's got a bunch of others too.
William wants to know this. This is a great question, William. Why did Peter put on his clothes before jumping in the water?
Okay, so William is referring here to an event that happens in John chapter 21 after Jesus is risen from the dead, and Peter decides to go fishing, and he takes 6 of the other disciples with him, and while they're out fishing, they're not catching anything, and then Jesus shows up on the shore, and they don't recognize him at first, presumably because he's in the distance. They can't see him clearly. And he asks if they've caught anything. They say, no, we've been fishing all night and we haven't caught anything. And he says, well, put your net on the other side of the boat and you'll catch something. And they do. And this is a bookend where it's just like at the beginning of the ministry, there was a miraculous catch of fish in Luke's gospel. And here at the end of the ministry, there's a miraculous catch of fish at the end of John's gospel. This causes the beloved disciple, who's one of the other 6, to realize that's Jesus. And Peter, it says, wrapped his outer garment around him or tied it around him and jumped into the sea because he was apparently stripped for work. He wasn't wearing his outer garment. So he puts it on, he dives into the water, he swims there, gets there before all the others because he's so excited to see Jesus. And so the reason he would have put on his outer garment is so he would have it to wear in front of Jesus when he gets to the shore, because he's not going to be working on the shore. He's going to want regular clothing on. And so that's what he would have, he may have just tied it around his middle and then jumped in. But then once he got there, he would have untied it and put it on properly. And assuming that's what, he fastened it around him means. You could debate, maybe he just tied it, maybe he put it on normally and then dove into the water. But one way or another, he put it on before he swam to shore because he wanted to wear it once he was on the shore.
All right, Peter. Thanks. No, excuse me. That wasn't Peter. That William asked the question about Peter. Thank you, William. Rob wants to know this. In Tobit, Archangel Raphael states that it only seemed to Tobias that he was eating, but really did not. So did Raphael atomize the food he touched when having meals with Tobias, or is there another explanation?
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, there's a little more. How would someone be able to explain that Jesus really ate with his apostles when Archangel Raphael only made it seem like it?
Okay, so this is referring to an event that happens at the end of the book of Tobit after Raphael has revealed himself to be an angel. Previously, he's been traveling incognito, masquerading as a relative of Tobit and Tobias. And then at the end, he reveals, oh, actually, guess what? I'm one of the angels who stands in God's presence, and he sent me here on this mission. And then he explains things like, when you saw me eating earlier, you were seeing a vision. So Rob asks, was he atomizing the food? Well, I mean, he could have been, but it doesn't say that. It just says they were seeing a vision. So maybe, it's just a mental image they're seeing of Tobit reaching out his hand and taking some food when really he wasn't doing anything with the food. At least that's how you could understand it on the literary level. Now, the thing is, the book of Tobit is not literal history. This is something that was mentioned, for example, by John Paul II. He identifies Tobit as one of those books it's basic. It's like a theological novel. It's basically an extended parable. And this is really clear when you read Tobit. If it's not as clear as in Judith. In Judith, it slaps you in the face from the very first verse. But in Tobit, it's really clear if you track what's going on in Tobit, that the author is telegraphing to his readers, this is a parable, this is not literal history. And there are various factors in it, like Tobit has this amazing age that he lives to in an age where people did not live to that number of years. He also has a hikar show up at the wedding, and a hikar this is kind of like having Paul Bunyan show up at your wedding. A hikar in the Middle East was a legendary folk hero. So, he's got all these clues telling you this is not literal history. Therefore, the remark that Raphael makes about them seeing a vision is just meant to explain something that could otherwise trouble the reader. The readers could be wondering, well, wait, didn't you say that Raphael ate a meal with them? If he's an angel, how does that work? And so he's just providing an explanation so that the reader doesn't have to worry about that. Whether angels can or can't eat when they're in human form is thus not a question that the book attempts to answer. It's something that, I mean, we can't prove it one way or another from the book, because the book is not literal history. Personally, I would propose that angels, if they're in physical form, that they could eat. You know, if Thomas Aquinas is right and they have what he called aerial bodies, which aren't, he thought they were knitted together out of air, and well, maybe, but if they can assume temporary material bodies, then they should be able to poke food in their mouths and chew it up and swallow it. Whether or not anything happens with it after that, I don't know. But I would propose they could eat if they're in human form, but that's not the way the author of Tobit is conceptualizing it. Now, what about Jesus eating in front of the disciples? Well, you have to think about the reason he did that. He was not trying to prove I'm not an angel. He wasn't trying to. What he was trying to prove is I'm not a ghost, because that was their second theory upon learning about the empty tomb. Their first theory was a naturalistic theory. They thought, oh, the body's been moved. You know, someone moved the body. That's what Mary Magdalene says. But then when Jesus himself shows up, their second theory is, oh, we're seeing a ghost. And to prove he's not a ghost, he lets them feel his body, and he eats fish in front of them. And he says, you know, you see a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And then he eats in front of them. Well, we got pretty good evidence that departed human spirits or ghosts can't eat. So his proof of eating in front of the disciples works for the purpose he's performing the action. He's performing it to show them I'm not a ghost. He's not performing it to show I'm not an angel. That would be a separate question that was not on their minds, because they weren't thinking, could this be an angel that just looks like Jesus? I mean, the two live options for them are, this is Jesus's ghost, or this is Jesus, and he wanted to push them towards the latter. So since we have good evidence ghosts can't eat, he ate in order to show them I'm not a ghost. I'm the real Jesus.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate the question. On we go with Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Barry, I wonder, is it a sin to be psychic? My grandmother was a very gifted psychic and a devout Catholic. This created some issues when she was criticized by the priest at church. She always believed it was a gift from God and used her gift to help others. She lived a very humble life, but did take small donations from groups of women who would have her do readings occasionally.
Well, so there's a difference of opinion about psychic functioning in the church, because the church doesn't have a teaching on it, and therefore Catholics are free to have different opinions. And apparently your grandmother encountered a priest who was critical of this, but that is not the universal opinion in the Catholic Church. In fact, as I said, there's no church teaching, and so Catholics can have different views on this. And some very respectable Catholics have actually believed in psychic functioning. St. Augustine, I'll just name three doctors of the church who did. St. Augustine was open to psychic functioning. Pope St. Gregory the Great definitely believed in psychic functioning, including precognition. And St. Thomas Aquinas believed in psychic functioning. He called precognition natural prophecy to distinguish it from the supernatural prophecy that God gives. He also believed in a form of psychokinesis, or mind over matter. In the 20th century, popes like Pope Pius XI and Pope Pius XII were both open to paranormal psychic phenomena. In fact, Pius XI supported a society of dowsers. And in fact, the most recent church ruling on dowsing, which was in 1942, permitted priests to take part as dowsers in scientific experiments on dowsing. And that was priests. It didn't have any restrictions on what laity could do when it came to dowsing. And actually lots of priests and bishops have been dowsers. There have also been Catholic parapsychologists like Father Herbert Thurston, Father Alois Weisinger, and Father Corrado Balducci. And even Gabriel Amorth, the exorcist who I mentioned last hour, I don't agree with him on everything, but he would use psychics in demonic possession cases. He'd use Orthodox, faithful Catholic psychics to help him figure stuff out. He called them sensitives, because that's what they call psychics in Italy. but he talks about it in his book. He used psychics to help with demonic possession cases. So if someone has psychic functioning and they really have it, it's not just imagination. Well, yeah, I'd look at that upon that as a gift of God and something he built into us. It may not function the way we'd want all the time, but perhaps Father Alois Feisinger's theory is correct that psychic functioning is the remnants of the preternatural gifts that our first parents would have had before the fall. But like I said, there's no church teaching in this area, and so Catholics can and have had different opinions, and you can make up your own mind.
Barry, thank you very much. You brought us right to the break with that question. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. More coming up right after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Have you ever been so grief-stricken? You can't see God in the tragedy. You can't see God in that cross. You're enveloped in that grief. You're enveloped in fear. And God is out the window. You don't see him standing right next to you.
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Every morning, 2 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin's our guest, and it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, a fun thing we do mostly on Fridays. I think it's usually Fridays when we do, maybe always Fridays. I don't know. But Jimmy said I could ask a weird question this time. So I'm going to ask you my weird question, Jimmy.
Okay.
Is there any such thing as luck? We talk about having good luck, bad luck. Is that just perception, or is there a real thing called luck?
Well, obviously we can explain a lot of what goes under the name luck in terms of just coincidence that is fortunate. Something good happens, but it's just by coincidence, and we could call that good luck. It's just random chance, but it happens to be random chance that plays in our favor. The question would be, would there be anything that would go beyond that?
Yeah.
Potentially. And, in the ancient world, they would say the favor of the gods did that. That's, or fate. Even the gods in the Greco-Roman world were subject to the fates. And so the fates might determine that you would have good luck. Well, as Christians, we don't believe in the gods or in the fates, but we do believe in the one true God. And so you could view fortunate things that happen for no apparent reason as God's favor. And so luck would be receiving the favor of God, whether you asked for it or not, in particular circumstances. Is there something else that might explain it? Well, an angel might take a benevolent interest in you and do something nice for you. Oh, yeah. So that would be possible. Or it could be, the soul of a departed loved one takes an interest in you and is able to, perhaps through their intercession, to arrange for something good to happen for you. Well, that could be it. Could you do yourself something that would have the effect of good luck, something with no natural explanation? Well, potentially. And what that would be referred to in parapsychology as is psychokinesis, or mind over matter. It also could be linked to other psychic functions like precognition or clairvoyance, like you sense where there's going to be a parking place and you drive to where there's going to be a parking place. You wouldn't necessarily sense this consciously, but actually there have been various parapsychological studies that have led to theories that are known as things like first sight or PMIR. I'm going to blank on exactly what that stands for right now. instrumental response. Anyway, there are theories in parapsychology that propose basically we all have psychic functioning happening all the time on a subconscious level, and it only occasionally bubbles up into our conscious minds. Well, okay, if that's true, then you could precognize or clairvoyantly view where's that parking space. Or you could potentially psychokinetically affect a situation so that it plays in your favor. And you wouldn't even need to be doing this on the conscious level. So that would be something else where something with no apparent natural cause could nevertheless turn out in your favor because of something you're doing without even realizing it. So it seems to me that the term luck could have, I mean, it can just be random coincidence that happens to be fortunate, but it seems to me there are several other things that could also cause the same effect.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say for your question.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate you letting me ask it. Like if you had go ahead.
PMIR, psi-mediated instrumental response. That's the name of that theory.
That is what I was going to say. I can't believe All right. Let's go to Steven's question. Steven, here he says, here's one. Is there an official theory as to how ghosts appear with the clothing they wore while alive? I understand plausibly the spiritual form of their bodies having expression in the afterlife, but how do presumably unspiritual items like dresses and coats and hats persist with such apparitions? Thank you.
Well, the church has no teaching on this, so it's wide open for speculation. However, this was one of the questions that parapsychologists looked into when parapsychology got started back in the 1800s, because they were studying all these ghost accounts, and they're talking about the ghosts wearing clothing, and usually period clothing from whenever the ghost was alive. And it's like, okay, what's up with that? How does that work? The basic thought among paranormal investigators and parapsychologists is that the way ghosts manifest to us is fundamentally telepathic, that they're giving us a telepathic signal that we're picking up on and allows us to perceive them, because ghosts are not electromagnetic phenomena. You can't pick them up with a camera that captures light waves and stuff like that. So it appears to be a telepathic signal that we receive. And then that signal includes enough information for them to be recognizable. And that would include things like, okay, their appearance is going to be the same, at least broadly speaking. They're likely to transmit the kind of clothes that they would wear in life, so you can recognize them. It's like if you see your dad, let's say he's not going to be wearing, clothes that were totally alien to him. He's not going to be like wearing a top hat and coat with tails like he was from Abraham Lincoln's day. He's going to dress like your dad. Unless your dad happened to wear such suits. There also may be changes in the ghost self-presentation, but it's going to be based on their self-image most of the time. How will you recognize them? How do they see themselves? And this can explain one of the things that a lot of ghosts appear younger than they did when they died, because they weren't old for that long. If a ghost person died at, let's say, 80 years old, they might appear at 60 as if they looked 60. They'll look younger because that more corresponds to how they thought of themselves. They also reportedly can change their appearances over time. They can update their appearance and their wardrobe. I'll give you two brief examples of that from a paranormal investigator I know named Lloyd Auerbach. One of his cases, known as the Lois of Livermore case, involved a family that had moved into a house in Livermore, California, and the parents in the family would see this woman who would wave at them. And they didn't know what to make of it, and they didn't respond. And one day their son, Chris, comes to him and says, so the ghost y'all have been seeing, the woman that's been waving at you, she wants to know why you're not waving back. And because the ghost, Lois, had been talking to Chris. And so you had multiple independent witnesses seeing this ghost, and they would see her in different forms, wearing different clothes and stuff like that. And so they brought in these paranormal investigators, including Lloyd. And one of the questions that they asked was why Chris would see her in so many different ages and outfits. And she answered by saying, well, in my true form, I'm just a ball of energy, like those aliens on Star Trek. But the way she would project herself, the way she would present herself, was based on her mood and her and what she felt like appearing. I'm aware of another case that Lloyd investigated. This is at the Moss Beach Distillery, which is up on the coast of Northern California. And there was a lady, she's known as the Blue Lady, who was killed there apparently during Prohibition times. So that's like the 1920s or early 1930s. And she was always seen wearing a blue dress. And so she became known as the Lady in Blue. But at a certain point, once the investigators got involved, they started talking with the Blue Lady, and she started asking about, so what do modern fashions look like? And they got her access to what modern fashions look like, and she changed her blue dress to look more modern. So when witnesses would see her later, she's wearing a modern blue dress.
A little bit of afterlife shopping. All right, thanks, Stephen. Thanks very much for that question.
At least those are the reports. I'm just giving you the reports.
Yeah. Rob says, if the world was actually created like in the Silmarillion, with the, I have never known it, Anur, helping to shape everything along the way, could the Greek or Roman gods have been more akin to a misunderstanding of angels, since Anur are like the angels, and be okay to venerate with that understanding?
Okay, so if the world was created that way, then it would be okay to credit the angels for what they did, because God doesn't have a problem giving credit where credit is due. So if he used angels to shape things in the world, you could acknowledge the fact that the angels did that, and you could thank them for the role they played. You could venerate them for the role they played. But the thing is, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any evidence that the world was created in this way. And so I would recommend sticking with venerating those that we know were involved, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, because Scripture makes it clear that all three of the persons of the Trinity were involved in creating the world as we experience it. That doesn't prove that God never gave a role to some angels, but he didn't choose to mention it in Scripture, at least in any passage I'm thinking of. And I understand why he didn't do that. It's because the ancient Israelites had trouble. They would get easily confused when it comes to worship. And so he didn't want them getting confused about, maybe we should worship these angels who had something to do with creation. It's like, no, stay focused on the true God. He's the one you want to worship. It might be possible to venerate angels for things they did, but God didn't choose to tell us about them being involved in creation. And so I wouldn't try to venerate them for that purpose. Interestingly, now, Rob makes the connection between the Aenir, if that's how you say it, from Tolkien, and the Greco-Roman gods. Could they be like kind of the same? And actually the answer is yeah, because one of the things that Scripture makes clear, this is particularly in Deuteronomy, but it's also in other places, is the high-ranking angels who are referred to as the sons of God. You see them referred to that way at the beginning of Job, where you got the heavenly throne room and God comes in, and then the sons of God come in, and then Satan comes in. The sons of God are what we would think of as high-ranking angels. And Deuteronomy indicates that when God divided the nations, which is the Tower of Babel incident, he put the nations under the tutelage of the sons of God. So like each nation has at least one son of God that's looking out for it. They're also called princes or commanders. The word Sar in Hebrew can mean either prince or commander. And we see in Daniel references to this, where there's one point where Daniel prays for 3 weeks, and then Gabriel shows up and says, sorry, I'm late. The prince of Persia, meaning the angelic son of God who's in charge of Persia, resisted me. And the only way I got through is Michael, the prince of your people. So Michael is the angelic prince that rules over Israel. Michael has the prince of Persia in a headlock. And after I give you this message, I'm going to go back and Michael and I are going to whale the tar out of the Prince of Persia. He's going to lose authority, and then the Prince of Greece is going to arise. So we have the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece as some of these angelic guardians that God appointed for Greece and Persia, only they've gone bad because they're resisting God. You know, they were stopping Gabriel from getting through. Well, that's why also in Deuteronomy it says the gods of the nations are shadim, demons, because they were angelic princes that turned on God.
Thank you very much, Rob, for the question. And that brings us to an end for today, but we'll do it next time. Jimmy, thanks very much. Thanks. I enjoyed the 2 hours of weird questions.
Me too. My pleasure.
I'm definitely playing The Devil Went Down to Georgia on the way home. I'm going to find that and play it on the way home. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.